Welcome to the Human Rights Cafe. My name is Jacob Sule.
I am Joanna Titus.
There is no one who sits in Geneva or sits at The Hague who says it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. No.
Very often the question is, how do you distinguish what people tend to call terrorism from a non-international conflict?
The judiciary is not really a free and fair judiciary as well. A lot of appointees are just proposed and elected by the military, and therefore, we didn't really have a free judiciary system.
And so the first thing that I did when I was elected was actually push for providing free menstrual hygiene products in our school washrooms.
With access to skills, opportunities, and education, children in rural and underserved communities can change their circumstances.
A lot of situations in which armed forces are increasingly expected not only to partake in armed conflicts, but also they're taking over this role of law enforcement operations.
Registered voter keep increasing, then the actual voter turnout keep decreasing. And we hope that we'll be able to change the tide this time around.
My name is Joanna Titus. I'll be hosting the show today with Jacob. I'm hosting live from Abuja, Nigeria.
So no matter where you committed, you are going to be prosecuted. I will say that Spain has been famous for being engaged in important judgment. For example, it's the case of the former dictatorship of Chile.
When I grow up, I decide that I want to be elders who can support young people or what they want to be in life.
You work with IAGA, one of the top rated civil society in Nigeria and by extension in Africa. What are your concerns for this forthcoming general election?
We need to say that the jurisdiction of the court and the convention will still have effects over this law.
So the parents are concerned that many of the youths are going out and protesting against the military coup.
The majority of our people do not really recognize the fact that we have rights.
In that conflict, it was realized that women and girls are often disproportionately affected.
If there is one existential threat that Nigeria is currently grappling with, it concerns around security.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation. This is the Human Rights Cafe conversation streaming live from Washington, D.C. My name is Jacob Sule, and I'll be your host. Today, I have multiple guests in the chat room who will discuss with me the state of education in Nigeria, particularly on access to student loans. It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Mojeed Alabi. Professor Mojeed Alabi is joining me live from Osun State. Professor Mojeed Alabi is the provost of Osun State University College of Law in Osun State. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining. I'm also being joined with Professor Olumide Babatunde. Professor Olumide Babatunde is joining us live from Nigeria as well. Professor is the pioneer vice chancellor in a private university in Nigeria, which is the Wed Midlands Open University. Thank you, Prof, for joining.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
I'm also being joined live from Nasarawa Kefi in Nigeria by Stephen Akawu. Stephen Akawu is a student leader and a final year student at the Nasarawa State University. Thank you, Stephen, for joining. And lastly, I'm also being joined by Salvation Grace. Salvation Grace is a human rights activist and also a student at the Obafemi Awolowo University. Thank you so much, Grace, for joining. Before we go into the conversation, like I said, today's conversation will look at the state of higher education in Nigeria and particularly access to the newly signed student loans. On the 12th of June 2023, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed the student loans bill into law. Coincidentally, due to some technical challenges, that bill as a law could not go into full operation. But I'm glad to announce that on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, the president again signed into law the Student Loan Act, which is meant to help students access higher education for the purpose of guaranteeing sustainable higher education. Very quickly, Professor Mojeed Alabi, you as a former federal lawmaker had made several comments about the state of higher education in Nigeria. Can you quickly tell us a brief overview of this newly signed law by the President of Nigeria?
Thank you, the host. I welcome everyone. The starting point must be that we must remind ourselves that the idea of student loan is not the first in Nigeria. Since about 1972, there had been the Nigerian Student Loans Board. And the board functioned effectively for upward of 20 years before it became bogged down by several challenges that eventually propelled the then military administration to put in a new decree setting up the Education Bank in 1993. Unfortunately, since the setting up of that bank by that decree, and even notwithstanding the promulgation of the passage by the National Assembly of an act to back it up in 2004, it is a sad note on our educational policy that the Education Bank has not even taken off until it did not take off at all. And to that extent, that one must commend the Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila when he introduced that issue of education bill in the National Assembly. And unfortunately, when the bill was, we appreciate the president too for keying into it. And one cannot fault the two of them. The two of them schooled in the United States, and I guess probably that they had benefit of enjoying this idea of a student loan. So the president quickly key into it without really going to without assessing the implementation challenges that are likely to affect the full operation of the law in view of what had happened in the past. And that is why the recent amendments came into being. Don't forget that the 2003 bills was widely criticized. Why? Because it put in a number of eligibility criteria that many felt could defeat the purpose of passing the act in the first instance. Because talking about the issue of minimum family annual income of 500,000, talking of bringing guarantors, and a host of other factors. So the presidency had to set up a committee to look into that, and a bill was sent to the National Assembly to review the 2003 Act. That is why we now have the 2004 Act, which not only, it was not just an amendment, it was a total reenactment of the 2023 Act, which we now have as the Nigerian Education Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2024. And that is the one that I'm going to be reviewing very, very briefly now because of the limited time that we have. The good thing about the new one is that it has removed the family threshold of 500,000 naira per annum. It has also removed the guarantor requirement. And furthermore, the loan history of the parents of loanees are no longer taken into consideration in determining whether they will be qualified or not.
Thank you, Prof. Let me quickly butt in there before you go into the details of the bill. I love the perspective in which this conversation is going. Let me quickly turn the mic to Professor Olumide Babatunde Longe. Prof, you are a very renowned scholar in cybersecurity, and a couple of years ago in Ghana, you joined a conference where you spoke about education and legacies in which teachers and educators are creating. Do you still share that same thought that students themselves, or as teachers must play a role in helping students shape their careers and choices of courses in which they study in universities? Professor Longe?
Well, thank you very much for bringing me up on the program. I want to also appreciate the erudite professor who spoke earlier. My perception about education and educational issues are a bit divergent, perhaps because of the several experiences and exposure I've had in several places. I felt that with regards to the the amended students' loan law, Nigeria is a country where we do too much partitioning. And when I say partitioning, We partition universities, we partition people, we partition human beings, we partition too many things here. Let me go down the lane with the TED Fund and ETF. It's so sad that that particular opportunity was segmented only to public institutions. When you look at a place like the US, people compete for grants, they write proposals, and it's applicable to everybody. So some of the things we're saying that we borrow from the Western world, we're just, partially, we're borrowing them in parts. We're not borrowing them in all. Of course, we have to contextualize, but at the same time, we should give a level playing ground, which I think what Professor was saying earlier on, as regards the amendment that has been done. So I'm hoping that when we look at the higher education index, which is supposed to be something that propels national development and growth, we will be able to actually find a level ground where this particular initiative by the government will be accessible, because education is all about accessibility. So when we remove accessibility by our natural instinct to partition, which is a very deep-seated problem in our society in Nigeria, we partition too much. There were times when people don't even believe those who lecture in state universities are anything as scholars. There were times when you look at the United States, you hardly find what is called federal or state universities. Federal, this, federal, that. So I want to believe that this new development will create an open platform, a platform that is accessible by everybody who is interested in higher education, whether you are in a monotechnic, whether you are in a college of health science, whether you are even in a professional training institute, provided that you are trying to get education at a level that is above the secondary school. This particular loan will be accessible to that person. Let me leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Professor Babatunde. I really enjoyed the perspectives in which two professors are brought into this conversation. And we're trying to balance the conversation here. So we have students from a federal university and a state university. Now, let me turn the mic to Salvation Grace. You are a student at the Obafemi Awolowo University, a federal university in Southwest Nigeria. What are your thoughts about, from where Prof picked it up, that education should be accessible and available to all? What are your thoughts generally on the current state of higher education in Nigeria, with reference to the newly signed Student Loan Act by the President of Nigeria? Yes, Salvation.
Yeah, thanks very much. I would like to also leave my premise from what Prof said. Education is all about accessibility. When students or people can no longer access education, then there's nothing like education in the big frame again. So to start with, I would like to to buttress my premise on building on what Prof said, that education is all about accessibility. When people can no longer access education, whether freely or without any inconveniences, I mean, by inconveniences, I mean mental stress, I mean going through a lot of things to get access to education. So that means there's a problem. And for a country like Nigeria, a country where we have enough resources, I'm one of the few people that believe that we are blessed in the country. We have enough resources, but these resources are not well managed by our leaders, and that's because we have corrupt leaders. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that education is meant to be accessible to everyone in the country. And so coming from a kind of federal university where people believe that we should get access to free funding, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, a federal university where the federal government is supposed or meant to sort everything. I mean, the school system is faulty. Talk about our classrooms, talk about our libraries. Our libraries are not well updated. Talk about the learning environment. So one would expect that the federal government puts in structures to fund education, but it's obvious that the federal government does not even have interest in supporting the poor masses, because there's not how you can you cannot differentiate between having access to education and not wanting the poor masses to have to enjoy or to access education. So I think that's my rough idea on this.
Thank you so much, Salvation, for that. I share some of your thought that indeed the federal government has a role to ensure that everybody have access to quality and free and fair education. Now, let me circle back to Professor Majid. You were literally going to dive into the requirements for the loan, the need for a guarantor, the requirements and all that. Can you speak more specifically on the need for a guarantor? For example, what happens to an applicant who is unable to, to find a guarantor? How do you expect such candidates or applicants to enroll in school and get access to sustainable education? Yes, Professor.
Thank you. Let me emphasize again that the advantage of the Student Loans Act is something that we must appreciate, because when we look at the title of the law, it's the Student Loan Access to Higher Education. So I must appreciate those who are emphasizing the issue of access. And that is one of the reasons why the 2023 bill was amended. Because under the 2024 bill, which was recently signed by the president into law, the issue of providing guarantor had been removed. Although this appears to create a level playing ground, because we know in Nigeria, people can turn down into many things. Somebody was talking of guarantor, racketeering, people may start asking for money for you to pay before they can serve as your guarantor. But nonetheless, whoever is going to take a loan must still have to provide something. And we cannot know how government is going to go about this until the board itself now set up a comprehensive guideline on how to access the loan. While we agree that we want to make it accessible to as many people as possible because of the need to grant access, at the same time, we must avoid a situation like it had happened in the past, where loans recovery are difficult to attain, where the program becomes unsustainable. Although I will agree with you that this problem like this are not even limited to Nigeria. Even in the United States, we've had crisis in the past that the rate of returning loans that are taken had gone, that even as of now, US was moving in the range of 2 trillion naira in unrepayable loan. And people are no longer interested. In fact, I know some of our kids who are there now are no longer taking federal loan. They are taking FAFSA, federal grant in aid, which one would have expected could do probably better than this idea of loan. But we still need to await what the guidelines will be, because you cannot just throw it open and give out loans without thinking of how do we recover it, bearing in mind that the Student Loans Board of the past died because there was no repayment. Again, the issue of ensuring guarantee has to be made in such a manner that the poorest of the poor kids will be able to take advantage of it, because this thing is not supposed to be for the children of the rich. And if it's not going to be for the children of the rich, then we must find a way of ensuring that even those who don't have money had opportunity of accessing loans under the Act. And we are glad that the idea of a family minimum wage had been removed. The idea of providing guarantor had been removed, but at the same time, we need to create an avenue for ensuring that those who take the loan will actually pay back, because it is when those who took the loan pay back that the program will become sustainable, that others can be able to take. And I'm very, very, very happy too that under the new act, the government has been able to create Nigeria Education Loan Fund, so that there is a pool of funds that will be available from which you can take, and that one will come from various aspects of the Nigerian economy, from money due to the federal government, 1% of the money due from royalty on oil, 1% of the taxes collected by the Internal Revenue Service. These are supposed to guarantee the basic minimum available fund from the pool of which those who are taking the loan could take it. But also we must emphasize the ability of those taking the loan to pay back in such a manner. And the good thing is that the issue of repayment is not even made enforceable if you are unable to get a job. Unlike the previous 2023 bill that says enforcement must start 2 years after NYC, The new one has given a leeway. It has even given leeway for debt cancellation if it is discovered that the particular individual has not been earning any income, the particular individual has not had opportunity of working to take advantage of the education for which he has taken the loan, and therefore somebody is not working, somebody is not having access to money, will not be able to pay back. And if it becomes so difficult, there is an opportunity where such individuals could also apply through the appropriate process to have the debt fully cancelled. So these are all that I'm appreciating in debate. But at the same time, I'm seeing the challenges. And we have to take out the fact that the challenges will relate to the issue of loan repayment, the issue of recovery of loan, the issue of financial sustainability. Don't forget that when you take a loan in a particular year, it's not going to remain the same amount in several years to come, particularly in the situation of our economy where inflation rate is so high and is almost increasing at the same time. So the guidelines that's been expected from the board will tackle all those things such that even the funds available to be given out as loan, they will have a way of getting involved in some investment so that the amount available at a particular time will not lose its value so much at a time that the cost of education is rising. I'm saying this against the background of TERFund. In TERFund, we have our colleagues who have taken TERFund loan, who have gone to the United States of America, go to Germany, go to Great Britain. They are no longer returning today. And I have a number of my colleagues who served as guarantor and who have been motivated to cough back the loan taken by those individuals. So we must particularly be able to ensure that while access is guaranteed to everybody, those who are given the access at the initial stage should not serve as a stumbling block to the access of others who are coming later, by putting in guidelines that will ensure that whoever takes the loan, which we commend, should also be willing and able to pay the money back. And that now goes beyond mere education. It also goes to the economy. It also goes to the ability of the government to provide enabling educational and economic environment to make graduates be able to get jobs. Because somebody who took a loan and is unable to get a job cannot pay back. So we must ensure that we grow our economy. We must ensure that we leave a level playing ground for businesses to thrive. We must ensure that our currency remains strong. We must ensure that youth unemployment is reduced to the barest minimum, so that when anyone takes any particular loan at any particular time, within a very little period after graduation, given the flexible repayment system, the person will be able to pay back. And if that one is added to whatever comes from the fund, then the sustainability of the whole idea of a student loan will be guaranteed. And it is in that sustainability that the future of the student loan lies. Because we don't want this initiative, this 2024 initiative, which emphasized the issue of access, to go the way of the past, when student loans bond become a man-o-man kind of thing, and eventually those who took them never bothered to pay back, and eventually the agencies collapsed. So we must appreciate that for now the issue of guarantee is reduced, but at the same time we must provide opportunity to ensure that those who take the loan will not kill the loan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mojeed. Let me turn back to Professor Olumide Babatunde. Professor, you working currently as a pioneer vice chancellor in a federal institution. What do you, in a private institution, how do you feel that some of the students, I mean, a large quantity of a student, and will not be able to access this loan? Because the loan states that this loan is only applicable to students who are enrolled or will be enrolling in federal or state institution. Do you think this loan is kind of like not all encompassing, or tries to strike like a segregation between those in federal institutions and state institutions? What are your thoughts on that, Professor Longe?
Well, I make bold to say again that in Nigeria we do too much partitioning. When you look at the US and some other parts of the world where we have leading universities, let me mention Harvard, Yale, let me mention Princeton, let me mention MIT, and a number of schools, the Emory. Many of these universities leading in the US are private universities. So I begin to wonder again, in our own wisdom, why we would, isolate. And of course, like Robert just said, majority of the people who took TEDFund and ETF to go study abroad with all the billions that we pump into them, they don't even come back because we do not create an enabling environment that will encourage them to even come back. So our issues are beyond the issue of providing loans for students and things like that. Both the private, the state, the federal university, by our structures in Nigeria, are contributing to human capital development as well as socio-economic development. So why partition it? Ordinarily for TEDFund, I would have expected that even if you are saying, okay, the federal will take about 50% of the share, the state takes about 30, then allow private universities to take 20. They are all being regulated by the same NUC, by the Federal Ministry of Education. So, like I said earlier on in my earlier submission, this partitioning thing is common with us, and it is counterproductive because we don't really know where the best brains will come from. I can imagine in the US where if you don't allow MIT or Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Emory to access federal grants, you don't allow their lecturers, their professors to access federal grants, you don't allow students from some of these universities to access federal grants. I'm sure maybe you also are in a private university over there. So it is counterproductive. I think it is time for us in this country to begin to remove our prejudices, even in education. We are demonstrating it. We demonstrate it in terms of politics. We demonstrate it in religion. All these prejudices will take us nowhere. Sometimes you also begin to wonder, those who are promulgating and making these decrees and formulating these policies and laws, some of them even finish from private universities. So what exactly is the problem? And when you look at it, what is the percentage of students in some of these schools we are talking about as compared to the percentage of schools in the federal and the state? So there is no reason, there is no justifiable reason, because you are saying that the 1% of the tax that is collected mostly from private organizations are not going to be accessible by those who attend private universities. It's a misnomer. It's an aberration. It is not global practice, and I make bold to say that. So if you are taking taxes from private organizations and you are using them to fund things in the public sector, and the private sector, educational sector cannot benefit from it, I wonder what exactly you are doing. Let me also again speak along the lines that Prof spoke. Even with the public sector where you are pumping the loan, so to say, if it is going to be pumped anyway, it is going to be beyond pumping loans. I would want a situation where even artisans, even those in vocational schools have access to finances that will help them. We don't need to give people money. We don't need to hand over money to people. Pay their school fees directly. If you want to do tuition, pay tuition. Then it goes round. Why do we're just starting off. Why do we need to pay for stipend and food and things? No. If you pay only tuition, people will find their rhythm. And then it becomes much more easy to know that the funds are disbursed directly to the universities where those school fees should be paid. So I don't think it is right to begin to hand over money to people, stipend, feeding, accommodation, and things like that. Let's pay tuition directly to the schools that the students are attending, and then we find additional measure around this. If we don't create jobs, if we don't create employment, if we don't encourage socio-economic activity, if we don't encourage private sector participation in things that we do, I can promise you we're going nowhere. That will be my comment at this point for now. Thank you.
Insightful thoughts. I do share thoughts in which you have really expressed. I also believe that the access to the loan should also be for all, regardless of the choice of institution you choose to enroll in. Now, let me turn to Stephen. Stephen, you are a final year law student at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. Last year, when the bill was signed into law, the National Association president, the NANS president, did say a couple of comments around the loan. What are your thoughts on this loan, particularly on the repayment plan and the time in which as students you're expected to pay that loan upon graduation and securing of a gainful employment? What are your thoughts on that, Stephen?
Okay. I think the repayment plan that was part of the repayment plan, I think is, to me, is fair. It's very, very okay that after you graduate, that the federal government are to come after you, then after 2 years of you graduating from any university, and you must have served. Section 18 of the Act provides that any beneficiary of the loan shall commence repayment after 2 years of him completing his NYSC. That is to say that the government, they're giving persons, beneficiaries, ample opportunity to have graduated. So it means you must have something due before they can come after you. So to me, it's a good one. It's a good one from the government.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I just want to make a very quick clarification there. I think the section you quoted is that is in the current law. That section has changed, and with a newly signed bill, I think section quickly. Let me back up. Section 28 sub 1 speaks about the repayment loan, the repayment plan for the loan, not section 18 as you have quoted. Now, let me back up to Salvation Grace. Are you still with us there?
Yes.
Okay, now Salvation, tell us there, what do you think should be the ideal repayment plan as a student if you are to be a beneficiary or recipient of the student loan? What do you think should be an ideal repayment plan for students when they intend to repay back this loan upon graduation?
Personally, I do not see into the idea of the student loan in any way. Talk about the accessibility of the loan. Majority of the student poor masses cannot access this loan with the criterion placed on grant. So personally, I wouldn't even want to apply for the loan for any reason. So if I can get these people that is needed to meet up the criterion, then I would get my school fees paid. It's as simple as that. Do you get it? So if I can get 2 civil servants as guarantors, so it means I do not need to get my school fees or to get the student loan. I mean, in Obafemi Awolowo University, we're paying 79,000 as an arts faculty of arts students. Before now, it used to be 20,800 naira. That's what we pay. So last year, the school management increased the school fees, and then it's part of the whole initiative of the federal government to refuse to fund education. So coming with the idea or the initiative of students' loan is like a way of like shutting students up that, oh, there's an alternative. We're going to increase the school fee, but there's an alternative. You can get the student loan. So I do not buy into the idea of the students loan. Instead, the federal government can come up with grants, scholarship scheme, and that will be accessible to students. That's what I think, because I believe that we have the resources in the country, and then the government do not just want to fund it, because that's my personal opinion, right?
Thank you so much, Salvation. Just a little bit of clarification from your thoughts. I know you did make some comments about the requirements for a civil servant from a particular level and a guarantor. With the newly signed clean copy by the president a couple of days ago, all those requirements are being kicked out, and the eligibility now being clearly spelled out in section 23. Those eligibility are quite simple, clear, and concise, which one of the requirements is you must be a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and you must have gotten admission into either a federal university, a polytechnic, and all that to be able to access the loan. Now, as we continue to back up, Prof, what are your final thoughts on the conversation today as regards the state of higher education in Nigeria and access to student loan in Nigeria? Very quickly, Prof.
Thank you. I must conclude by saying that while we appreciate the noble intention of those who brought about the act in terms of the ease of access to higher education by the downtrodden, by children of the downtrodden masses, while we appreciate the interest-free nature of the loan and the flexibility of the repayment terms, we must emphasize that appropriate machinery must be put in place to ensure that those who take the loan are able to pay back. And when we say appropriate machinery does not come only in terms of providing guarantee or whatever. It must come in terms of the ability of the loanee after graduation to get appropriate work to do to be able to earn sufficient income to pay back the loan. Otherwise, the Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2024 will become another grandiose and moribund project like those of the past that will become not only unimplementable, or if implemented at all, a major abatus on the finances of the government, on the finances of the country. And I must agree with Professor Olumide that the access should not be limited to any particular category of students. It should be made open. I must tell you that for me, I'm not a fan of that. Even in let's say that we are using an example, student loan is just one of the several education grants that are available. You can take the grant without going into loan. You can take other scholarship without going into loan. So it's only very limited number of students that will want to go into loan, because even there, 20 years, 30 years after graduation, people still have the idea of loans on their neck. And the issue is currently being reviewed of whether the idea of loan is worth it or not. But for me, to the extent that it's designated as ensuring access to education, you may give it a trial. But we need more than just the Act 2024 to put in the necessary legal and institutional framework to ensure that the purpose of establishing the Act, of passing the Act, is not defeated. And the Nigerian students, the youthful population of Nigeria to which the Act is targeted, will have opportunity of having access to education in such a manner that they, as well as others, including those in vocational studies, will be able to make their own contribution to the development of the economy, while the economy will in turn ensure a good level playing ground for the use of the education for which they took the loan.
Thank you so much, Professor Mojeed Alabi. Now, thank you so much, viewers, for joining the conversation. I have been speaking with Professor Mojeed Alabi, the Provost of the College of Law of Osun State University, who joins us live from Osun State. Thank you so much, Prof. I've also been speaking with Professor Olumide Babatokpe, who is a pioneer Vice Chancellor for Open Midlands University in Nigeria. Also joined by two distinguished students, Salvation Grace, who is also a student at the Obafemi Awolowo University, and Stephen Akawu, a final year student at the Nasarawa State University, Kelfi. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, viewers, we have been speaking on the state of higher education in Nigeria and access to student loan. My name is Jacob Sule. It has been a great pleasure speaking to you all. Thank you all and have a great afternoon. Goodbye.